Great. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I hope everybody can hear me. If you can hear me, thank you. If you can hear me, oh, was it? Okay. Please use the raise hand button that's down on the bottom of your screen, just so that I know that the sound is working. Or in the chat, you can give me an okay. Any of the folks who are here today. Okay, I'm not seeing anything at the moment. If you're having trouble hearing us, it would be helpful to know that you can hear what we are saying. Okay, great. Thank you. I am seeing some responses now. Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, well, thank you for being here this morning. I'm so excited for this presentation by our co-hosts this morning, Arlene and Deborah. So I was getting a little distracted by reading a question. Arlene Banks and Deborah Spanner. Let me tell you a little bit about them before we get started. Arlene Banks has been a master gardener since 2020. She lives in San Rafael and has learned about plants that grow well in her Marin microclimate. Arlene enjoys visiting gardens and talking to other gardeners and working in her own garden. Her co-host, Deborah Spanner, has been a Marin Master Gardener since 2016. And as a Master Gardener, she has performed garden walks to give homeowners advice about water use and helped maintain the demonstration gardens at Blackie's Pasture and Tiburon, and also conducted research on growing leafy greens and herbs, which she has shared with the Marin Master Gardeners Edibles Guild. Deborah enjoys exchanging ideas with other gardeners and working in her home garden in Mill Valley, where she has lived for over 30 years. So welcome to both of you. And I think we are ready to start the presentation.
We will be discussing fragrant shrubs, fragrant vines, and fragrant annuals and perennials. We'll begin with fragrant shrubs. The first plant we're going to talk about is Joycia citriodora, more commonly known as lemon verbena. A lemon verbena has long, thin, medium green leaves that are highly aromatic and have a lemony scent. If you touch lemon verbena, you will perfume your skin. Flowers, the plant has white and lilac flowers that bloom in summer. It is a perennial deciduous shrub that grows upright and reaches a height of 4 to 6 feet. The plant requires full sun and an average amount of water. Because this plant can get a little leggy, it is advisable to pinch prune it every year. By pinching off the top leaves, it will become bushier and less lanky. It's a plant that grows well in containers. It is pest resistant. It can be used in sachets to freshen the air. Lemon verbena has culinary uses too. It can be used to make tea. It is often used as a garnish in cold drinks, and it can be used for flavoring for beef, fish, poultry, and vegetable dishes. Okay, the next slide is a Coleonema pulchellum, more commonly known as breath of heaven. It is a shrub with yellow-green needle-like leaves and star-shaped pink flowers. In Marin, the plant blooms in late winter and spring. The plant lives up to its name. It brush against it and it emits a very pleasant heavenly scent. The plant grows to 4 to 5 feet. There is also a dwarf variety known as sunset gold that has chartreuse foliage and will grow to approximately 1.5 to 2 feet. There's another species to this plant also called Coleonema album, which has white flowers and is known as white breath of heaven. But regardless of which species you have, breath of heaven grows well in full sun and in partial shade. Well-drained soil is a must. When it is first planted, Breath of Heaven requires regular watering, but once established, the plant is drought tolerant, which is a big advantage. Breath of Heaven doesn't really have to be pruned, but it can be pruned to control its size or open its inner areas. If you do decide to prune this plant, it is best to prune it after the blooming period ends. It's important to keep in mind that Breath in Heaven produces flowers only on new growth. So if you prune it, you don't want to prune it all the way back. It is basically an easy plant to maintain, and that's why you not only see it in home gardens, but you also see it in a lot of public and commercial areas. Okay.
Okay. Another shrub, the Daphne odora, also known as Daphne. The flowers are they're small, pink, deep red flowers in sort of late winter, early spring. Very powerful scent, just wonderful, almost knock you over with the scent. It is evergreen. It does like partial shade and well-drained porous soil, and doesn't require a lot of summer water. The leaves are interesting all year. They're narrow, and they have that kind of outline in cream. So it's a pretty plant. It can be pretty all year. It is also known to be deer resistant, and can grow up to 4 feet tall, 6 feet wide. I have one in my yard, and I keep it well trimmed, because it stays under another shrub that sort of goes over it, so it's going to protect it from the sun. Okay, next slide. Okay, Joycia ternata, also known as Mexican orange. And as you can see from the photo, it's clusters of white flowers that have an orange blossom fragrance in late winter and early spring. And it can grow, it is evergreen too, so it's nice, you know, for all year for your garden, a green plant. It can grow 4 to 6 feet tall and wide, and the leaves are also aromatic. It attracts bees and butterflies. And it can grow in partial shade or sun, and needs a little to moderate water. Does need to be pruned. It is also known to be deer resistant, so you can plant it in your front yard. Okay, next slide. All right, so pretty much all citrus have very fragrant flowers. So I'm focusing on this citrus, the Meyer lemon, Citrus Meyery, and it is if you've ever smelled the flowers from a citrus tree, it's just wonderful. It's in early spring through fall. You can sometimes the flowers, you know, from a flower grows the fruit, right? It can be a shrub, or they can actually grow, you know, depending on how it's pruned, it can grow into a tree. They're good for pots, as you can see in the photo. They do require full sun, good drainage, and moderate water. But a lot of people talk about having, like, say, a dwarf Meyer lemon in containers for years and years and years. So if you're looking to just grow a container plant, a container citrus, the Meyer lemon is a good choice. I think I already mentioned it needs full sun. Okay, so next slide. The Gardenia Jasminoides. Again, a wonderful scent. Has white flowers. Some species are the small flowers, maybe an 1.5 to 2 inches, and some have, you know, the larger gardenia, the more, you know, sort of popular one that people use for corsages. powerfully fragrant. So they are high maintenance. They can have pests, including aphids, powdery mildew, and mold. So that's one of the benefits. One of the things you need to keep in mind is that they should be in full sun, and they need heat, and they do need regular water. So not a drought tolerant plant, but you know, if you want the gardenias, you're going to have to water them. They do the leaves, it stays green all year, so that, they are not deciduous. All right, so next slide.
The next plant we're looking at is Pyrrhus japonica. Pyrrhus japonica is commonly known as Japanese andrometer and is sometimes referred to as lily of the valley. It is native to Japan, eastern China, and Taiwan. It is an evergreen shrub whose flowers have a notable scent when in bloom. The mature plant grows 6 to 10 feet. However, there are some varieties that are bred to be smaller in size. What I find interesting about this plant is new leaves are bronzy and reddish and become glossy green as they mature. The plant has urn-shaped flowers that grow in clusters, and flowers are generally white, but there are some varieties that have pink or salmon-colored flowers or partially red flowers. Pyrrhus plants form buds in late autumn and winter, and they look like beads. But then the beads kind of look more like flowers that open when they open in late winter or mid-spring. Pyrrhus is related to azaleas and rhododendrons and is often planted with azaleas and rhododendrons because it has similar growing requirements. All these plants grow best in acidy soil. It likes sun but not heat. In places where summer temperatures are high, it is best to plant Pyrrhus in partial shade. The plant should also be grown in an area that is sheltered from the wind. It does very well in containers and is quite attractive. It's quite an attractive plant when in bloom. The next plant we're looking at is Pittosporum eugeniotis, commonly known as lemonwood. Let me see. It is strongly fragrant and has yellowish flowers. What I like about it is it has this particular species has interesting wavy edged shaped leaves that are yellow to medium green. It can be used as a screen, but it's recommended if you do use it as a screen that you prune it, that should be pruned several times a year. By pruning it, it becomes more bushy, and the plant works well. When you prune it, it's probably a good idea to prune it about 2 to 6 inches from the top each time you prune, and frequent pruning results in a bushier plant. If you're going to create a hedge, which is often done with this plant, it is advisable to plant several plants about 1.5 feet apart. This plant likes full sun, but grows well in partial shade. In areas with hot temperatures, it does better in partial shade, and the plant takes a moderate amount of water.
Okay. The next plant, shrub, is the Rebus sanguinium, or known as flowering currant. That's my phone. Okay, and it has very fragrant, small pink, red, and white flowers in winter. The photo here is a magnification. They're much smaller, and it is deciduous, so that means it loses its leaves in the summer. Unless you apply extra water in the summer, then it may keep its leaves, which is great. So the leaves also have a strong resinous scent. And then there's a fruit, a berry that is known to, I have never tried one, but they're known to be edible, but with a bitter taste. So it's a popular garden shrub. And I don't know if I mentioned the flowers come in early spring. All right, next slide. The Rosa SPP. Sorry about that. Somebody wants to talk to me very badly. Anyway, the Rosa SPP. SPP meaning multiple species, and well, that's very true with rose. With the rose, there's hundreds of species, and some roses are fragrant. Many roses are fragrant, but many are not. So if you're looking for a fragrant rose, you have to check around. I recommend going to rose gardens and trying out different ones. This rose on the top is a Mr. Lincoln, which I have in my garden, and the fragrance is just out of this world. So probably my favorite rose. Roses are deciduous, so and they need to be pruned every year. The shrub styles need to be cut down, pruned, pretty strongly, so that they produce another beautiful bush in the summer. They are known to be high maintenance with pests such as aphids, powdery mildew, mold, but those things can be handled pretty easily. Thing about the rose is that it does need full sun, and the deer like to eat the roses, so you want to make sure they're not available to the deer. Some people do things like spray certain things on the roses, which will discourage the deer from eating them. But in my experience, I've had deer eat sprayed flowers. They don't care, depending on where you are. Okay, so let's go with the next slide. It's Sarcoca rucifolia, sweet box. It has a small, fragrant white flower, very small, but very fragrant. And then it will perfume a large area in the winter, kind of a late winter. It is evergreen, so again, green all year, a dark, waxy foliage. And it'll grow 4 to 6 feet tall, 3 to 7 feet wide, and it's easy to grow with few pests, so a workhorse in your garden. And the fragrance is a standout as you walk by. It's wonderful. It does grow well in shade, but little to moderate water. Next slide.
Now we're going to move over to vines. The first vine we're going to talk about is Lonicera periclemenum, better known as honeysuckle. This particular species is native to Mediterranean region of Europe. This also species is commonly known as woodbine and has a sweet fragrance, which is emitted by 2-inch long flowers, which bloom in spring and summer and usually last through the fall. In the fall, last to fall, and then fall, the flowers are followed by berries. The flowers are generally yellow on the inside and white on the outside, as you can see in the photo, but there are some other less common varieties that are partly purple flowers or pinkish flowers. The flowers have a nectar which attracts hummingbirds and butterflies. The honeysuckle vine can be deciduous in some regions, but in Marin, with its mild winters, it is an evergreen. Honeysuckle can grow 10 to 20 feet at height, but its height can easily be controlled by annual pruning. Honeysuckle is grows quickly and is a good choice if you want to cover up a bare wall. I have honeysuckle in my garden along a 6-foot fence. I wanted to cover a large area, and I achieved this by planting a few plants 2 to 3 feet apart, and then spreading out the branches and staking the branches up with a wire support. Honeysuckle should be pruned at least once a year, and it's a good idea to thin out some of the branches. It can be grown in full sun or partial shade, and it requires a moderate amount of water.
Okay, the next vine is Trachelospermum jasminoides, also known as star jasmine. And you can see from this photo that it's able to climb a wall. So it's a pretty good climber, climb a fence. And here it is in bloom, usually in May and June. Just a wonderful scent. If you have it by, your front door, everyone will smell it on the way in and on the way out. It's just magnificent. And it can climb very high, 10, 20 feet. And one plant can go very wide. So depending on how you want it to be in your garden, you prune it as needed. I had it in my garden, and it was it covered a large part of my front yard as sort of a kind of a shrubby looking plant, and it was great for a long time. And as I say, it could be a ground cover. The dark green waxy foliage is all year long. So it can be pretty. It does need water to stay green. And it requires full sun. And so the next slide.
The next slide is Wisteria floribunda, known as Japanese Wisteria. Another very common species of wisteria that grows in Marin is Wisteria sinensis, which is Chinese wisteria. Both plants have a spectacular show of very fragrant clusters of generally lavender and sometimes white flowers. On the Wisteria floribunda, the Japanese wisteria, the leaves are 12 to 16 inches long. The other wisteria has slightly shorter leaves, maybe up to 12 inches long. Wisteria has a short blooming period for about 2 to 3 weeks each year, but when it blooms, it's a real standout and looks beautiful. Wisteria is a deciduous vine with twisting branches that need strong support and pruning at least on an annual basis, and preferably 2 times a year. Wisteria can be trained to grow as a shrub or a standard. It's very adaptable, but you have to direct it so you control where it grows. I have wisteria in my garden along the top edge of a fence, and I also have a gate that goes into my end house, and it's on top of the arch of the gate. And I really look forward to its blooming period. It looks gorgeous, at least for a couple of weeks a year. If you grow wisteria as a vine on a fence or at the side of your house, you have to be committed to pruning as the plant grows very vigorously and can do damage to a structure with its twining tendrils. Pruning ideally should be done twice a year, once after the flowering season in July or August, and then again in January and February before new buds form. Each time you would be cutting back unwanted shoots and some of the new growth. This controls the size of the wisteria, and pruning encourages it to form more flower beds rather than green growth. Wisteria requires full sun and little to moderate amounts of water. It is not fussy about soil, but it requires good drainage. I just love it when it blooms. Now we'll probably talk about the annual perennials and bulbs, the smaller plants. Okay. The first plant we're going to talk about is Frasier Alba, just known as Frasier. It's an heirloom species that has white funnel-shaped blossoms and blooms in spring and has a very powerful scent. Frasier, this particular heirloom variety is used to grow other types of other species, and the Frasier, there's over like 100 species and 16 different species and just over 100 varieties. The hybrids, I think this white one is beautiful, but if you prefer colors, there are hybrids that come in red, pink, purple, lavender, blue, and white, and some varieties are even bicolor. What's interesting about Frasier is Frasier stems turn to one side at right angles and grow parallel to the ground. And the blooms are on the turned stem. They're usually 5 to 10 flowers per plant. It's grown as a perennial in our area and does well in well-drained soil and full sun or partial shade. Frasier blooms in spring. Frasier blooms in spring and enters a dormant period in late spring and early summer. During the dormant period, no water is required, which is definitely an advantage. It is generally pest-free and easy to maintain. Plants should be pruned after the blooming period ends as they enter the dormancy stage. You would remove faded flowers immediately to avoid them going to seed. But I would recommend waiting until the leaves turn yellow before cutting back the foliage. While foliage is still green, photosynthesis is taking place, providing energy to the corms. This plant originates from a corm, and the corms store energy to produce blooms in the next season.
Okay. The next one is the Heliotropium arborescens, and it has tiny white pink flowers. It is an evergreen perennial and can grow up to 4 feet and 2 feet wide. It's good for your patio or an entry, as you're walking by. It needs full sun, regular water. It blooms usually in February in this area, and it can use a little bit of shade because it doesn't like the scorching hot sun. So let's go to the next slide.
The next slide is Hyacinthus orientalis, commonly known as hyacinth. It is a perennial fragrant plant that originates from a bulb. It blooms in early spring and grows up to 1 foot tall. Flowers can be white, pink, blue, or purple, as you see in this photo, and they have sword-like bright green leaves. To grow hyacinths, you would plant bulbs in mid to late fall, 3 inches deep and about 6 inches apart. It is best to plant them in full sun, but they will grow in partial shade. This plant can be grown successfully in containers. Hyacinths require a regular amount of water during growth and bloom. After the blooming period, it's advisable to remove the spent flowers and cut back the foliage once it turns yellow. It should be noted that hyacinth bulbs contain oxalic acid, which may cause some skin irritation. For some people, after handling, it's a good idea to wash your hands. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and hyacinths were, nothing grows much there in the winter season, and hyacinths were one of the first plants to bloom in early spring. So I remember them from my youth. In California too, hyacinths are one of the first blooms in spring. They look good as border plants, and they look good along walkways. And as cut flowers, they look stunning in bouquets. The next plant we're talking about is Laterus odoratus, better known as the sweet pea. It's grown as an annual, and it's known for its clusters of fragrant flowers. There are species of sweet peas that have been bred for summer blooming, but this particular species, which is known, odoratus, which is known for its fragrance, prefers cooler temperatures. It blooms in late winter and spring, and it usually dies off in the summer heat. Blossoms come in single colors or bicolors or a mix of colors. Each blossom consists of one large upright roundish petal, two narrow side petals, and two united petals underneath, and it's known as the sweet pea shape. The plant either has a bush habit or a vining habit, and vines protrude tendrils that attach themselves to nearby support. It would be recommended to plant this plant from in the fall, from mid-October to December, when the ground is cool. Plants will not germinate in very warm or hot weather. It's best to plant it in full sun. Once it blooms, deadheading the spent flowers prolongs the blooming. The plant is toxic, actually, and not edible. It should not be confused with a variety of an edible pea plant known as sweet pea. The plant is not completely deer resistant, but deer prefer other plants which are less fragrant and toxic, so you may get away with the deer not attacking this particular plant. The next plant is Narcissus actea, also known as the poeticus daffodil. There are lots of varieties of daffodils, and we chose this one because it's a very fragrant variety with white petals and a broad yellow cup in the center with red edges. Cultivated daffodils have been organized actually into 13 different divisions based on its characteristics. Poeticus division daffodils have a short cup with a contrasting color. In our county Marin, it can easily be grown as a perennial flower. It can grow well in full sun or partial shade. It does best in well-drained soil. It requires water during the growing season, but no water once the flowers die back. It is a bulb that should be planted in the fall and while in bloom, and it should be planted in the fall. I would suggest for the maximum visual effect to plant groups of at least 6 bulbs. That would have good visual impact. And it looks pretty spectacular when mixed with other types of bulbs. It's good in beds, on borders, around shrubs, and under deciduous trees, and they make excellent cut flowers. These flowers are relatively easy to maintain. They should be deadheaded as they fade to prevent unwanted reseeding. And foliage should be cut back to the base after it begins to wither, and it will grow the following year. There are no serious disease or pest problems. Deer and rabbits tend to avoid this plant due to its toxins. This particular bulb has been a recipient of awards from the American Daffodil Society and also the Royal Horticultural Society in the UK, because it's quite an attractive plant.
Okay, the last of our 20, the Viola odorata, also known as sweet violet or wood violet. And from the photo, you can see the distinctive shape of the leaf, almost like heart-shaped leaf. This plant the violet is the symbol of the city of Athens, and it is the emblematic flower of Aphrodite and her son Priapus. So it's kind of a love flower, a love plant. It has a lovely sweet scent, often used in perfumes and flavorings, and the leaves and flowers are known to be edible. The flowers are white. They can be white, lavender, or purple, and it can be a ground cover used under shrubs or in shade, and also can be successful in pots. And it blooms in late winter and spring. So not a full sun plant. So if you're needing something, have some shade area, this might be the plant for you, like a bright shade. It spreads through stolons and runners and can crowd out other plants. And that's the end of our official presentation. We are open to questions. You can raise your hand and ask a question if you'd like.
Arlene,
Yes.
we did have a question during the presentation of someone was wondering, are any of these plants considered invasive?
Well, just this one, this Viola odorata is known to, to crowd out other plants, but in general, not so much. I think the star jasmine can grow pretty hardily. What about you?
I don't believe that any of these plants would really be considered invasive plants that get totally out of control. And they're all very controllable with pruning.
Yeah, they need to be pruned. Otherwise,
some need to be pruned more than others, but
Yeah.
no, they're not invasive plants.
Well, were there any other questions? If you have a question.
I just want to
Go
make
ahead.
a comment that I feel invasive plants sometimes take over and don't allow native plants to grow well, and none of these plants, I believe, are in that category.
No, I think we made a special effort to pick plants that were not invasive. Try to make it nice for people not to have to keep digging things out.
Okay, if anyone had another question, now would be the time, and you can enter it in the Q&A module if you like. I will wait another minute or two and see if anybody has a question for us.
So I just want to say, I noticed that a lot of our plants, a lot of fragrant plants, especially the ones here in Marin, are fragrant in late winter, early spring. Just a few are fragrant through other parts of the year. Rose being one of them. And then
I noticed that picture of the Royal Sunset Rose that you had. Is that one that you grow yourself?
I don't have that one myself, no.
No, that's beautiful too.
Yeah, it's so great. Well,
All right. Well, if there are no further questions, Arlene, did you want to add
I was
something?
just gonna say, well, roses are a wonderful, cut flower. So you cut them and bring them into your house, and then makes your house fragrant also.
Yes.
Master Gardeners has done some presentations solely on roses and the different types, how to take care of them, and we may have another presentation on roses in the future. There are just so many varieties to pick from, and it's just a matter of personal taste, and so many colors, so many types.
Right. I mean, you can study for years about roses and not know everything. There's so much to know.
And I do see that we have someone who would like to ask a question. So I am going to try to unmute them so they can ask the question. Pamela, I believe that you had a question, and if you'd like to unmute yourself, you could just go ahead and ask it, or put it in the Q&A, whatever you would prefer. Let's see.
There's a question in the Q&A about intermingle with edibles.
Yes. Yes. Let
from
me just see
Wiki.
here. So I guess, Pamela, I apologize. I'm having a hard time unmuting you. So if you wouldn't mind just typing your question in the question and answer. And then someone did have a question about intermingling, I guess, any of these plants with edibles. I hope I'm interpreting that right.
If that person would like to kind of explain their question better, but a lot of these plants can be, flowers can be mingled with edible plants, especially the low growing bulbs and things like that.
Right. I mean, you can put a tomato plant, you know, or any kind of edible in with lots of different things. They're not going to hurt each other. You just have to watch for the, you know, that the deer don't come and eat them. So you have to have them in a protected area, because the deer will eat edible plants, things that humans like to eat.
Yeah. The person wants to know if there's a benefit to planting plants near edibles. There's a whole topic on companion planting, and some plants do have a benefit by being near edibles, or they benefit. That would be a whole other topic. I can't think of an example offhand. There are certain plants that probably should not be near other plants, but that is a whole topic for discussion. In terms of these plants, I'm not aware that there's any problem growing them near edibles. I don't know if they specifically benefit edibles. Sometimes flowering plants benefit edibles by keeping away certain types of pests, but I'm not aware offhand of any specific benefits, but there's not a problem growing.
Like the planting marigolds in with your edible plants is supposed to be good for preventing pests for your edibles.
We may do a future presentation on companion planting where we can get more into this topic.
Okay, and I believe that Pamela still has a question, but I'm unable to unmute her. So perhaps if she wouldn't mind entering it in the Q&A, we could answer it that way. Okay, well, I apologize for that. Pamela, maybe if you still would like to ask your question, I can just send it along to Arlene and Deborah after we.
Oh wait, I think it's coming.
Here it comes.
She said she has no. Pamela says she has no questions. Maybe
maybe we answered her question.
Or maybe
very good. Okay.
Oh, maybe she just raised her hand. Yeah.
She did raise her hand, and Pamela, can I hear you? Is that your voice?
Yes, you can hear me.
Oh, excellent. Okay,
yeah.
So please go ahead.
No, I thought it was a great class. Quite a few of these I have in my garden. I'm more disappointed this year with my Daphne because we had to take down part of our cypress tree, which was the shade for the Daphne, and now it appears not to do so. It doesn't like its new conditions, I should say.
Yeah, they don't like full sun. They need some shade.
I know. So I'm trying an umbrella over it during this.
There you go. Stand all day with the umbrella, right?
Yeah, I kind of have it like on a stick, and it kind of shades it for right now.
Yeah.
And then the winter will probably create a little more shade and it'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was a wonderful, great presentation. So thank you very much for putting it together. Very succinct and clear.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was fun to do.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I learned a lot and lots of wonderful plants. I was jotting notes while you were talking. Things I want to investigate. So thank you so much for the presentation this morning. I did want to mention that the recording of this should be available sometime next week on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to share the word with any of your friends who might have missed today's presentation. They can view it later once it is posted to the YouTube channel. And I know that we do have another Master Gardener talk coming up soon, so please watch for that talk, as well as other things on our website under our calendar. So we're larkspurlibrary.org, and you can view upcoming events on our calendar. So I want to thank you both, Arlene and Deborah, for today. It was very informative and a great presentation. I will echo that. And unless there are any further questions, I think that will be it for today. And I just wish everyone a happy rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.